what's going on YouTube? You got Jordan here with Outdoor Gear Dad. I've got an exciting series that I'm getting ready to start. You know, if you've followed my journey over the last, several months, you know that I'm a big outdoors guy. I love backpacking, I love camping. I just love being outside, and I love the gear associated with being outside. So everything from backpacks to water filtration systems, cooking systems. And one of those things that I really like, and I've reviewed before on my channel, is knives. And I'm a huge sucker for knives, everything from, a folding everyday carry up to a, large fixed blade kind of machete style knife. Anything with a sharp edge on it, I'm just all over. And so I've been buying knives for a really long time. Again, it doesn't really matter what kind of knife it is. It's really about what am I going to use it for, right? And what's the practical application? And so I've dabbled in experimenting with different knives. And, it wasn't really until I got into like the bushcraft scene that I learned about this world of custom knife makers out there. Now, obviously I knew that there were custom knife makers out there, but I didn't really get into, this idea of collecting their knives and buying their knives until I got introduced to the bushcraft scene, because these makers are they're really prevalent in that scene. And so I started researching them and just looking at their work and following them on Instagram and on social media, and was just blown away, not only by the craftsmanship, but just the beauty of their knives and the functionality and how much time was put into that. And you can really see the difference in a handmade knife versus something that, you're just buying off of the shelf. And that's not to say that the stuff off the shelf aren't great knives. There are some incredible knives that you can buy off the shelf, but there was something about that handmade knife that really just got me excited. And so some of the makers that I really started to follow and to purchase their knives. The first one, a guy out of the UK named Ben Orford. Ben Orford has an incredible story about how he got started and really, doing kind of wood tools and making wood furniture and evolving into being a serious knife maker. And in my opinion, makes one of the greatest knives out there. He does everything from, the grinding of the blade to the heat treating of it to, handling it. And he just makes some really beautiful knives. And I have a couple of his knives. I've owned several of his knives, and just a huge inspiration to me. Another one is a guy named Adam Gray from AA Forge. Adam has a very signature look to his knives. He's really he does a really good job of combining unique materials, wood with micarta, with antler, to just make some really incredibly beautiful knives. But his knives are also extremely functional. He uses great steel. They come razor sharp. His heat treat is spot on. And so I really love the way that Adam's knives look. And I have owned so many of his knives over the course of the last couple years. In fact, I own several of them now. But he has, again, a very signature look. And then there's some makers that are just, they have just these workhorse knives, right? Brian from Sergeant Edge Tools is another maker that I really like. I've had several of his knives, and they're just knives that are just workhorses. I can just beat on his knives, and I can take them out, and I can baton wood with them, and they're just extremely strong, and they're built to last. And again, that doesn't mean that these other guys aren't, but this is just kind of how I view them when I'm purchasing knives. And then Chris over at Plainsman Knives, he's another one that I really like. I like Chris because he's very similar to me. He's got a full-time job, and he just loves making knives. And it's a huge hobby that he's been able to turn into kind of a side business. And his grinds are great. I love the cleanliness of his grinds. And so I have several of his knives too. Now that's just to mention a few. But there's so many out there, and every single one of them has a kind of something unique that they do. So being that I'm just huge into knives, and I've been acquiring them and collecting them and using them, I think about the analogy for those of you that are into guns, right? You go out, you're shooting your gun, you're getting into guns, you're buying more guns, and it gets to the point where you're happy with the ammo that you have, but you want to try your hand at maybe loading your own ammo. And so you start dabbling and you get maybe a small setup and you start playing around with loading out ammo. And before you know it, your ammo that you just got into kind of as a hobby is now shooting better than some of the factory stuff. And that's how a lot of these makers got started out. They wanted to try their hand at making knives, and they progressively got better and better and better, and now they have an entire business around it. And that's really what drew me to wanting to make a knife, is not necessarily the business side of it and creating a business around it, and that's not really the plan at this point. I mean, it could get to that point, but the idea is just being able to create and make a knife that I'm proud of, that I want to own, that I would use. And so that's really what this YouTube series is going to be on. I'm going to be releasing episodes, hopefully weekly, that will be just talking about the journey. And today I'm really going to show you where I'm at in this journey currently, the materials and the equipment that I currently have. And then each week or every couple weeks when we release a new episode, we'll be slowly upgrading a new piece of equipment and trying it out. And I don't want to say trying it out in the sense that we're going to just get something and test it, and if it doesn't work, get something else. I'm going to do an extreme amount of research, and I'm going to purchase what I believe to be the best for the money. And that's a big thing for me. I'm a dad. I've got 3 children under the age of 5, obviously a wife, and it's important to me that I take into consideration, our pocketbook as well as the quality that I'm going to buy. So that's really what we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to walk you through, I'm going to show you a couple of the knives that I've made, and they're far from great, but I'm proud of them because I made them, and that's really exciting to me. So let me show you a couple of those. So we're talking about homemade knives. And when I was getting started, I really wanted to make something that was simple, but I had very limited resources. I had a Dremel, I had some sandpaper, and that was really about it. Like I had a vise, a couple grips, and when I say grips, I'm sorry, a couple clamps, and that's really all I had. And so I needed to be able to use the resources that I had to make a knife. So these were the 3 knives that I made first in this order. So this was the first one, the second one, and the third one. I used an old saw blade, and I had a Dremel, and I literally just used like a diamond coated bit, and I traced the outline of the knife onto this saw blade, and then I kind of used my Dremel almost like a drill press and just slowly started to chip away at this saw blade until I had the blank of a knife. I used sandpaper and just like some hand files to get it going. And one of the funny things was I didn't have any wood. I didn't have like cool handle material, so I just had some oak laying around, like literally firewood, and I cut a piece of that out with a hand saw and hand sanded it down, and this is the knife that I came up with. I didn't have any pins, so I took one of those kind of hooked wall hooks that you screw into the wall to put frames on, and I hammered it down, and I used that as a pin. I just bought some like really cheap epoxy from Home Depot, but this was the knife that I made. First knife, and it functions. It's sharp. It's not pretty by any means, but it absolutely works. So I upgraded a couple things, nothing big. I bought some like pins. I watched some additional YouTube videos, and this was the second one I made. Now you'll notice on this one, I did some like, aesthetic things. I used permablue and I blued the blade right here to give it this kind of like rustic look. And then same thing, I only had this oak wood, this firewood, so I used a stain and I stained it. But I did buy some pins, and so this knife was certainly better than this one. You can see it's nowhere near perfect. I didn't have any professional grinding or sanding equipment, so I was just doing everything by hand. But again, nice little knife, it works. So then I moved up and I bought some actual handle material. I bought some ironwood slabs. I had the pins already. This started out as a different shape, but because I was messing it up so much, I ended up with this small little like carver knife. But it was an improvement nonetheless. And so this was an improvement. Each one was an improvement, and that's all I'm really looking for is just an improvement on the knives. And I did all of this with a Dremel, an old saw blade, and some sandpaper and some cheap epoxy. And that's how I accomplished making my first 3 knives. So as you can see, I made knives. I accomplished what I was looking to do, which was to make a knife. I didn't have nearly the equipment that I needed to make something that was pretty or super functional, but all 3 of the knives that I made with limited resources end up working. So I turned to YouTube. Now, there's a ton of YouTube resources out there for people looking to make knives. The Art of Craftsmanship was one of the YouTube series that I really liked to follow, and I liked this because his stuff was, yes, he had good equipment, but he explained it in a way that I could translate to stuff that I had. So I watched a lot of his YouTube videos. Dan Camo has a blog online. I'll put the link down below. Hands down, one of the best knife blogs. I mean, this guy has every DIY tip you can possibly think of. I used a ton of his templates. Instead of designing my own templates and trying to figure out what looked right for a knife, he provides a ton of templates, just an incredible amount of resources. So between those 2 things and then some other YouTube videos peppered here and out, you can learn to make a knife. And then it's just about practicing and doing it over and over again and learning from your mistakes. So after I made these 3 knives, I realized that I was at a point where I'd kind of hit the ceiling. Right? Now this is the same with when we go back to that shooting analogy and the loading your own ammo. You get to a point where you're making some decent ammo, but you want to turn out maybe more, or you want to take your ammo to the next level. So you have to buy some better equipment. So I decided that because I was kind of at the ceiling, this is what I thought to be the best that I could make with the resources that I had. I decided that I was going to upgrade some of the equipment that I had. Now, again, taking into consideration the cost of things, I went to Harbor Freight naturally, and I got some stuff. So let me show you my shop. Let me show you what I have, and then I'll show you the knives that I've been able to make with what I have currently. So this is my shop, and when I say shop, I want to make it very clear that this is my garage. This isn't a fancy shop out in my backyard that I've invested a ton of money in. This is just my garage, and I've taken a small section of the side over here, put some tables down, and dedicated this to a workspace. You'll notice this big empty space. Yes, that is my scooter. It's fun. But this big empty space right here is where my wife parks the family minivan. And so this is a functioning garage. We still use it as a garage, but I've just been able to take a small section here and turn it into an area where I can make knives. So let's talk about some of the equipment that I have. So I bought this Harbor Freight band saw, and this band saw, I believe, was around $150. Harbor Freight always has those 20% off coupons, so I don't remember exactly what the cost was when it was all said and done, but I think it was about $150. And this is just a 9-inch benchtop bandsaw. Then I got this Harbor Freight 6-inch bench grinder. Came with a light, which I thought was kind of cool because the lighting out here isn't the best. I've put some lights in, but it's still not the best lighting, so this little table grinder has been great. And then I bought this from Harbor Freight as well. This is a 4x36-inch belt sander and disc sander. Harbor Freight. Don't remember the exact price on it. I think it was probably around $70 or so. And then I bought this 1x30-inch belt grinder. I bought this last because I was under the impression that I would be able to make everything with this. And I realized very quickly that I needed something better in order to do my grinds and accomplish my grinds. Now, this was the Dremel setup that I had already had. It's this little Dremel drill press setup. And so that's what I made my first 3 knives with. And then I bought last this drill press, also from Harbor Freight. This is a 5-speed bench drill press. And this has been good for accomplishing what I need. And, you know, then I have just some extra bands for stuff. I built this little shelf here and got some things like boiled linseed oil, mineral oil, got some good epoxies. And so that's it, guys. It's a really basic setup. I think the important thing to note is anybody really can do this. I mean, if you have a little bit of space, you can set up a little shop. And so this is the current setup. I obviously have other small things, you know, like different types of clamps that I use. I have a vise, which I use quite a bit. And then I also have down here I have a small forge. And in that ammo can right there is some quenching oil. And we'll talk more about the forge later, but really this isn't to actually forge steel. This is just to heat treat. That was another thing that I learned after doing the saw blades, was that you need to heat treat steel in order for it to be strong and function as a knife. So we'll cover that forge in a later episode. But this is it. This is the little setup. And let me show you some of the knives that I've been able to make with this setup that I have right here. So as you can see here at first glance, there is a huge difference between what you see there and what you saw here. With some basic upgrades to the equipment, I'm able to produce a much prettier knife and a much stronger knife that's a lot more functional. And so this is the order in which I made them. So I started with this one, and then I moved up. And you can see that with each knife, I experimented a little bit. I tried to do something a little bit more unique and really test my abilities on the machinery that I have. So this was one that I did in 1095 steel, desert ironwood, orange G10 liners, brass pins, Scandi grind. Then I wanted to try my hand at a bolster. So I did some maple down here with a green canvas micarta bolster, black liners. I did mosaic pins, also a Scandi grind. And then I wanted to try like a big old chopper, kind of like something that I could take out and, you know, baton some wood with, put a little like spear point on it. And I also wanted to try doing lanyard tubes as the pins. And again, I won't go through all of these, but you'll see that with each one I just experimented. This was the first one that I did as a convex grind, trying my hand at this. Now none of these are perfect, not anywhere close. But what I'm really trying to demonstrate here is just the improvement that we're making. And this is the most recent one that I've made. You'll notice that this kind of looks like some of the AA forge blades. Adam's knives have been a big inspiration to me, so I just kind of wanted to replicate something similar to some of the knives I've owned of his. So walnut, this is a micarta here, red G10 liners, brass pins. But you can see again that the improvement between these knives is drastic. Between what you saw right here and with a few upgrades in the equipment, what we can get to here. So we've seen a huge difference in the quality of knives that we can make with some basic equipment. and stuff that I haven't spent a ton of money on. I think all in all on this entire setup, I'm probably close to around maybe $500-600 for all of the equipment. And these are the knives that we're producing. But I've gotten to that point again, kind of where I was with the Dremel, where I feel like this is the best that I'm going to be able to do on this equipment. Now, there's probably some little things that I can refine. The cleanliness, just taking my time with really sanding and making sure that things are polished. But as far as like form and function, this is the best. This is the best I'm going to do. I've hit a ceiling with this equipment. The other thing to note is that a knife like this takes me an extremely long period of time to make. And the reason being is grinding on that little 1x30 takes forever, and I have to constantly be changing out belts. So it's an absolute process. So the first thing that I'm going to upgrade is my grinder. From all the research that I've done, the grinder is arguably the most important tool in a knife maker's shop. So I am going to research a ton of them. I'm going to, figure out what people say makes a good grinder, but I'll tell you what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a 2x72, so a 2-inch by 72-inch belt grinder. And I want to find something that's made in America, that's versatile, where I can slowly begin to upgrade parts and components to it to do different things. And I want a company that is willing to work with the new guy. That will basically allow me to ask questions as a novice, not really knowing what I'm doing entirely, and that will be there to support me during that process. So that's the research that I'm going to go do before this next episode, and you guys will get to see what I've landed on and what I am going to be using to make knives moving forward. So thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Please do check out this next episode, because this next episode, I will have made a decision on the grinder, and we'll do a full unboxing. We will do a full kind of spec review on why I chose that, what makes that grinder special, and we'll get it set up in my shop, and we'll just do this whole episode on the most important tool in a knife maker shop, and that's the grinder. So thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.
Hey, what's up YouTube? Really appreciate you checking out this most recent video. Hey, if you haven't already, go down and click the little subscribe button. That way every time I post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can come on back and check out what's new. My hope is to bring you content that's short enough that you could watch it on your lunch break. I also hope to bring you content that actually interests you. Stuff relating to the outdoors, everything from guns to knives, hunting, fishing, camping, you name it, I'm gonna try to get it onto this channel. So go down and click subscribe, and we'll see you next time.